All right, so yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Andreas GAARDER. I'm the Vice President of FUTUREON for the EMEA region. And I have the pleasure of being here today to discuss some interesting, relevant topics around digitalization in the energy and asset-intensive industries. We are going to have a good talk about different topics around digital asset lifecycle management, transformation of operations, decision-making, different operating models, and how digital platforms can have an impact on our operations. And also, of course, the role of digital twins, which has been the buzz of the last 3-4 years in the industry. So with me today, in no particular order, I will introduce our participants. So we have Dr. TUULA RUOKONEN, who is here with us. She is working at the VTT, and you are working in the sustainability science space, looking at co-creation and co-innovation of joint development projects, and also future customer solutions related to sustainability and carbon neutrality, as far as I understand. Then we have Alistair Caithness. He is the CEO at Energy Tokens, and he is working based out of San Diego and a recognized leader in the development of asset-backed blockchain tokens. And I'll be very curious to hear your views, Alistair. And last but not least, from TECNATOM, we have MATEO Ramos. He is the Director of Operation and Control Rooms at TECNATOM, focusing on the energy production sector with a lot of work around nuclear and also other interesting energy generation methods. So with that, I think I would like to start by addressing some of the, in your view, perhaps we can start with Mateo. In your view, what are the main, in your sector where you're working, what do you see as the main biggest potential for digitalization, and how can your customers leverage that, as you have seen it over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So hello, Andreas, and thank you for your introduction. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I think that the most important driver for digital transformation at the end of the day is reducing the costs or increasing production. Normally on the energy sector, increasing production is dependent on the availability of the assets. So finally, we can be doing projects, we're doing digitalization projects if we are going to reduce the costs or if we are going to increase the availability of the assets. I think those are the two drivers for moving into digital transformation projects.
Yeah, this is Alistair from Energy Tokens. I think what we're working on is the tokenization of the energy assets and the energy production itself. So what I see the blockchain is a device that provides this ability to reduce costs, which is obviously key. But then what we're operating and what we're developing is the liquidity aspect, is that if you've got this capability to tokenize energy assets, therefore the money's not locked into the life cycle of the project. And, you know, we've been tokenizing this on a small scale, but really now we've done proof of concept and able to do this, you know, the model can be scaled out to the major operators. And it's not just about tokenization of energy assets in terms of, you know, we talk about democratization of ownership. You know, the general public will be able to buy into energy assets, which are essentially asset-backed tokens, similar to like a cryptocurrency, except it's backed against assets rather than backed against nothing. And it will give you distributions based on the production, whether that's oil and gas or renewable energy going forward. But I think what we are thinking would be key is that once the model works, it's how the major operators are going to be able to utilize this. And if you think of, you know, major production, you know, I'm from originally Scotland, so, you know, a lot of the production we spoke about was in the North Sea. and then how the North Sea was essentially, passing from one operator to another. So what's been key in terms of development, what we're doing in terms of blockchain and tokenization, is this ability for operators to start to utilize this technology to work with other operators. And I think that's key in terms of what we're operating on.
So you're using blockchain technology to drive collaboration across and information sharing, I presume, between the operators, Alistair.
Yeah, it's information sharing that we're able to do for the first time. So essentially, up until now, it's been very difficult for operators. If you start looking at seismic data, it's like, yeah, we can, if you think big operators are going to share seismic data, but they can't actually share it, like who actually owns it. But now you can go to a permission blockchain, and therefore, because it's held on a permission blockchain, and the only people getting access to that are the major operators. So you could say ExxonMobil, Shell, and BP all have access to one blockchain. They are now able to share seismic data and information through the blockchain in a way they've never been able to do in the past, because essentially it's one underlying, if you think about in terms of like databases, it's one underlying database shared between the three of them. And that's what the blockchain's starting to do. So what the blockchain's going to do is it's going to allow all these operators, it's going to do a twist on the market space. So it's going to allow these operators to work with each other in a way they've never been able to work with before in terms of sharing information. The piece that we're focusing on is the tokenization of the asset and the distribution. So it's unlocking liquidity in assets. But this is now allowing them to operate in a way they've never worked before as well. And that piece of digitization through the blockchain, it's going to change everything. It sounds like sort of, you're looking to the future in terms of, this access to the technology. But what it's really going to do is just allow collaboration in a way where they can trust their partners, because essentially they're both going on to a central database where they can share information together, if that makes sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense. And what are the main challenges that you come across when you go out to the prospects and start discussing blockchain with them? How do you find the general perception of blockchain as a potential information carrier and facilitator, if you want to call it that?
It's so early days with it that ultimately it's just starting to come into the market space right now. So, and when the oil price is high, there's no need for them to be using this. When the oil price is low, because it's a cost-cutting device as well, it's something that's key with them, And I just think the adoption is going to be slow, but once they start using it, it's going to be mass adoption.
Super interesting to follow the blockchain space, actually. I mean, normally hear about it, obviously, in the financial world, but it's just interesting to follow it also in the industrial sector.
The blockchain energy, they're operating out of Houston, and now they're running a couple of projects, just to give examples. But one of the ones they're using is obviously sharing of seismic data. But now they're going to start looking to run projects on it. So therefore, you'll be able to execute contracts on the blockchain. So if you think of the major operators and why they're wanting to do this is because they're going to save money and fixed costs. So if you think of, goods getting delivered on site in an oil project or an oil and gas project, right now that would get goods delivered. Once they've been inspected, you'll have 90 days to pay it, and then you'll have to wait for this payment period. Because everything's going to be done in smart contracts, essentially once the goods are delivered on site and you've delivered everything agreed in the smart contract, it automatically executes, and then the people will be paid. So what's key about that is that suddenly for the major operators, they're looking at saving, long-term 7 to 10% of their fixed costs from a financial perspective, just by using smart contracts, which is just one part of the blockchain. So, but if you're turning over $500 billion like the big guys are, and they're looking at ways in terms of, from a financial perspective going forward, this technology is going to be able to remove back-end admin and finance costs. And, I've heard guys from Saudi Aramco, guys from Shell Ventures talk about, this is the sort of, once this technology is implemented in the next 10 years, 7 to 10% of their fixed costs, which is like a massive amount of money for these companies. So they're just starting to run these projects on the blockchain, and they're just saving so many different ways with the technology, and they're just every day they're learning new applications of it. I'm just operating in one area of it, but it fits in with digitization as well, so it's going to sort of fast track everything. And once they start to understand it, they're going to start to utilize it in every aspect of their business. That's what's so exciting about what's about to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's really interesting. So thanks for that, Alistair. So I think TUULA, I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, from the projects you have been working on over the last couple of years, is there a common denominator or recurring theme that repeats itself for successful operations when businesses transform themselves going digital? And if so, what does that look like in your experience?
Yeah, that was a very interesting question, because I think that all these different technologies which are now appearing and being enablers to do things what we actually already 20 or 30 years ago wanted to do for modeling and simulation and optimization. Now all that is possible, and okay, blockchain is one very key thing for sure, but there are a lot of other things like different kind of cloud-based solutions. And I fully agree with Mateo that the key is that there is always a business case to it. But what is nice about this digitalization is that actually all those business cases which are related to performance or availability, they actually are also very key from the sustainability point of view. So we are at the same time reducing the emissions and also making things more efficient. So meaning that we are actually at the same time doing both things. And when you are saying that what has been the key during the couple of years, I think that it's really about being able to calculate more efficiently, using modeling techniques which were not before possible, AI, machine learning, and all that. And that has been applied now already in quite many places. I think the extensive use is still to become, and I think that we all agree that digital twins, I think we still see them very differently. But digital twin as a wide perspective, including everything from the design phase to the life cycle of the plant, that is something which will be coming. And that will actually, what I want to point out here when having the chance to kind of say the main things, it's also changing the work of people at site. So that will be a very big change, and that has to be taken into account. So maybe this didn't answer your question, but at least wanted to point out these things.
No, that's very, very good answer. Thank you, TUULA.
If you let me,
yes,
Andreas,
please.
yeah,
Yes.
I completely agree with you, TUULA, and I think that in many markets, profitability and sustainability comes together, because sometimes you have, for instance, the carbon markets, or you have some restrictions from your regulator and things like that. And at the end of the day, a lot of times, if you are more sustainable, you're going to be more profitable. For instance, we are doing some projects using artificial intelligence in order to reduce the fuel consumption. And that affects in both ways, because you are going to increase the sustainability of the asset, but also you are reducing the cost, because the fuel, you need to pay for that. You need to give the electricity, the output of the electricity to the market when it is demanded. And also you are reducing the cost in carbon emissions. So I think that most of the times it comes together, fortunately.
I just want to say, I always harp on about the blockchain because that's basically all I know about, No, but it's just, but one of the things that's interesting now is in terms of tracking carbon emissions through the blockchain. So if you think of it from a database perspective, the CO2 emissions in terms of oil and gas from a tracking perspective, you know, they're already tracking it on central blockchains now already. So they're starting to run that in projects, which is going to mean that companies going forward is, you know, everything's going to be transparent and it's going to be centrally done. And I think this is going to lead to, you know, anything that leads to transparency with sustainability is going to help. And it's just going to drive to, you know, the drop in CO2 emissions. So it's just like what everyone else is saying there. It's just all part of a process, you know, and it's just, this is just one part of the cog and the key, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Good, yeah. And Mateo, in the nuclear sector, how is are there any talk of deploying blockchain in your sector that you are familiar with?
Yeah, well, as you said at the beginning, most of our background is in nuclear, but we work on the different electricity production technologies. I am not familiar right now with any project involving blockchain in nuclear, except some pilot projects for the for applying that for the chain of buying some devices. Like for instance, there are some cases in some countries where there has been some fraud on the buying some components, and it was not the right component with the right specifications. Probably if you needed a replacement for an equipment that is very old and it is very complicated to get it. So I heard some projects that are being using for that, for keeping the track on those kind of components. But for other use cases that, as we were discussing before we started with the panel, the use cases are sometimes the key thing in a digital transformation project. I am not familiar with.
Right.
Maybe
yeah,
they are, but I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, we were talking a bite before this session about how important it is to break things down into, to be successful, to break things down into sizable bite-sized chunks of manageable use cases and pin down where exactly are the pain points and what are the use cases that can solve those specific pain points, and it makes life easier for everyone. And I think that's one of the approaches we have seen working quite well in FUTUREON when we embark on this journey with our customers to try to help them collaborate smarter, faster than they did before, because now we are under pressure to deliver faster in the new commodities environment. And definitely breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, working out meaningful use cases, and then scoping them and attacking them one by one is one approach that we have had success with. So definitely something I think it's maybe all the panelists are familiar. I've seen something familiar in their work. I don't know.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And I think that what is interesting is that when we think about the whole value chain, or actually value network of energy, for example, there are a lot of things which are happening in different parts. And maybe Mateo and me, we have the background of production, and then there is, of course, the transmission and the end customer preferences, and nowadays even end customers being the producers. So I think that all this will be making a major change in the whole value network. And then it comes to be the question that what are the things, how do you optimize that, and how do you actually utilize the technologies we have available at the moment the right way. But yes, I fully agree with you on these use cases, that there has to be always some value added when you are making a new application, and how you build that.
Yeah, sure, because finally the
Yes.
technology is just a tool to get a target that you have. So you have a user, you have a client that has some pain points. You need to identify them and to try to define which is the best technology in order to solve the problem, to validate, to pilot the technology if that is possible, to do it as fast as you can and as cheap as you can, especially if you are confused, if you don't have success, the sooner you do that, the better. And then if in case you have success, then you can start to scale up, to validate and to scale up and to build a solid business case in order to have some investments in that. Unless there are some disrupt changes, as Alistair was discussing with the blockchain, that I'm sure it is going to be something that is going to change a lot of things in different sectors. Probably it is going to take a few years in some of the sectors. In others, probably it is coming pretty soon. Otherwise, you need to be doing that use case by use case. And I think that also something that is very important is to understand that a digital transformation project is not only about doing what you do in analog into digital, is that you need to transform also the process that you have. Otherwise, it is not going to add a value.
Process and the work of the people. So I fully agree. One thing which came to my mind when you were explaining exactly that approach is that if you think about the traditional businesses where I would say everything in energy still is pretty traditional. We used to do everything with this kind of waterfall development way, and now think about lean startup or minimum viable products and all that new kind of stuff. It also needs a lot of changes in the way how we do things, and with new technologies where there are so many potentials and very fast development, it is very demanding, but it has a lot of possibilities too. So I have seen it very much different from some tens of years ago, and it's very interesting how you now approach. But scaling is pretty demanding. So like you said, it's not easy.
So TUULA, from your perspective, what we have talked now a bit about digital twins and blockchain, and I guess those are quite familiar topics for all of us here, and probably most of the listeners as well. But in your view, what are the up and coming next big most promising technologies from your perspective that you think are going to become bigger for the coming period?
Yeah, I'm a technology freak. I have been in business for a long time, and I'm always excited about the new stuff. And I kind of was hoping that I get this chance to say what are the next things. And I think that different kind of now thinking from the production side, for example, all kind of autonomous systems which are self-learning, self-healing. Even many people talk about predictive maintenance and preventive maintenance still, but I think that we are coming to the prescriptive and even autonomous operations. Robotics, real robotics, meaning cobots and a new type of way how we can maybe do remote operations at the site, so that you either have an autonomous system or then operated by a remote operator. So all this kind of stuff, they are exciting and giving us a chance to do things which are totally different. Starting from the design of the equipment already, thinking what are the different possibilities. That's the key. We were talking about the life cycle, but I think the design part is the key. And I understood that is actually our chairman's view also to the digital twins. So maybe you can comment on it yourself too.
Yeah. So that's one of the things we focus on in FUTUREON is the value of building the digital twin from the earliest phase, and then maturing and evolving and growing that through the different more mature phases as your project evolves. And it has all kinds of values derived from that. Information gathering and retention, communication, collaboration. And once you have your digital twin from the earliest phases, you will be able to, again, find some good use cases and deploy, who knows, data science, predictive workflows, and so on down the line. So this is something that we also work a lot with our clients with. So Mateo, preventive maintenance, is that something that makes you excited or more here we go again? Or is it, what would you like to say about, would you like to say anything about preventive maintenance? What's your take and perspective on that? I'm guessing that it could be something relevant for your sector, but
actually we are working right now in some projects regarding that. We call that ACM, Advanced Condition Monitoring, but finally that's the same thing. We are collecting the data that the asset has in real time. They have an OSIS of PI or another historian server that is collecting the data of the different systems of the asset. We are processing those data into the different algorithms that we have for each one of the different systems and the main components. We have trained those algorithms with the historical track that we have of operation of the assets. And what we are getting with that is that we are able to identify if there are some degradations on the equipment. And we are having very good results with that. One of the assets that we are doing this service right now, we have been analyzing, because it was the first year of service, and we have been analyzing the impact of the service, because each time you have an alert from the system, we analyze with our experts and we provide an alert in case it makes sense from an operational perspective. We alert the maintenance guys. If it is not a true positive, a true alert, it has a cost because you need to get involved some people of the plant. And in case it was a real alert that appears before the alerts that you have at the plant, it adds a value in terms of the potential damage that it has prevented. And the benefit for that is 3 times the cost of the service. So it makes sense. Of course, moving completely from the traditional maintenance programs that we have into this kind of programs, I think at this moment it doesn't make sense. It needs to be done in a graded approach, but it adds value, it gives more availability of the asset, and it reduces some maintenance costs of some systems. So I think that's one reality that we have right now.
I'm very interesting, Mateo. So I'm curious to know if there are currently, that you're familiar with, any pilots where there are asset owners who are actually trying out going away from risk-based inspection or planned inspection programs and really just going predictive, if that's happening at all, or is it still years down the line?
Yeah, there are plants and there are some sectors that are very active in risk-based inspections. In other sectors, like for instance in nuclear, it is more complicated to move into this kind of programs because you have some regulatory requirements that is more complicated to change. So probably you cannot do that for some systems, for the core systems that are the safety ones, but you can do it for the balance of plant and other systems. So yeah, there are some experiences with that, and I think that's really fascinating, and that is giving us opportunities to reduce the cost and to optimize the operations.
I could maybe add on that one, because I think it's both, and you need to have of course reliability based maintenance program on your background, but the thing is that to collect exactly like Mateo said, the data and learning from that, it's very important for especially for equipment manufacturers, that they would all understand their own equipment and that both reliability and then the predictive maintenance programs, that they can propose right things and they will be updated. But at the same time, it's very absolutely important to understand the whole plant. So in that sense, I think that it will be always a combined effort. But then it's much easier if you do have the data also and the present condition of the equipment, and you can react to that one, both from owners and also the contractor's point of view or the supplier's point of view.
Thank you, TUULA. So, Alistair, I'm a bit curious to understand if there are any links that you can see or that you might be working about on between blockchain and data science and AI, and what does that look like at the moment, if there's anything?
Yeah, I would say one of the big things that they're looking to do is just, so everything's sort of running on APIs speaking to each other. So essentially, we're running the energy tokens platform, and we've built it on an AWS front end blockchain. So essentially, we can plug in any third-party data into it now. So what you're finding and going forward for people to understand is that everyone's systems were in the past running sort of, the way they were having to run together. You were having to get the, sort of these APIs, have to speak to systems. Now everything's just plugging into each other. I think one that's interesting that IBM's doing for the shipping industry that's going to get applied to a lot of other industries is, 80% of the world's shipping is now tracked on a blockchain essentially operated by IBM. So, in going forward, if they're doing it for the shipping industry, what they'll start to do is in terms of, well data analysis, things like that. So what we can do is we can just plug in well data analysis and then up to the minute well data. So you can actually just track up to the minute in terms of production. But in the past, this was actually quite difficult for, you'd be having to get third-party software, it would have to plug in, they'd have to give you reports, and all this is now just through APIs. And then the advantage of the blockchain is because it's one central database, then all the systems are getting connected to each other. So what you're going to find with digitization, the blockchain is going to be an underlying pin to connect a lot of these things together, which I think is going to be interesting for a lot of companies out there.
That's interesting. And in the renewable space, Alistair, we talked a bit about was it emissions tracking? What other big application areas do you see for blockchain in the renewable space?
The area we're looking at is in terms of tokenization and allowing fractional ownership into renewable energy assets. So what that'll do is it's going to allow, essentially right now, because my knowledge is really from land drilling in America and small to medium-sized projects, where a lot of these people have non-op interest into the project. But what the blockchain and tokenization is going to allow them to do is it's going to allow essentially people out there to acquire interest into renewable energy projects. And as it starts to produce electricity, people will start to get distributions from that as well. So that's like the area we're working with in terms of tokenization. But when you start looking at in terms of emissions and CO2 emissions and then what renewable energy is actually generating, it's just going to make everything a lot more granular. So everything's going to be up to the minute. And, the data sharing is just going to become easier and easier and going forward. And I just think like the blockchain is going to speed up the transition in energy because of this. Because suddenly we were talking originally about dropping in CO2 emissions from oil and gas, and then this database system is going to track everything. But then you're going to have this ability to basically track everything you're coming in from in terms of renewable energy as well. And then you'll be able to start feeding renewable energy into powering oil and gas infrastructure in the land drilling. Already looking at that, they're doing it in Abu Dhabi, stuff like that. So that's dropping CO2 emissions, whereby you've got massive solar farms now powering the huge pump jacks. They're doing it in small levels as well. You're capturing flaring of gas, feeding that back into the system, reducing electricity costs, reducing emissions from there. And the blockchain is just an underlying pin of connecting these technologies, which I think is really interesting.
That's fine. And I think I want to say that the data and the data quality and density is the classic Achilles heel, right, of any data science project. And I'm becoming a bit hopeful in terms of what Alistair is saying in sense of increasing the granularity, and I'm guessing also the precision and quality. So it might make all our lives easier. Maybe data will become higher quality, more dense, because of blockchain.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to start to happen going forward. And people, it's one of these technologies that's just going to be when people start to understand it, they're going to be able to apply it to everything. And it's not going to like revolutionize something like we've got the television or the telephone. It's just going to allow this ability to share information at a granular level that we've never been able to do before. And it'll just start to create more and more and more collaboration. And then I'm only doing it from my knowledge, but when more and more companies get involved in it, they'll just start to collaborate in a way like they've never done before in terms of sharing information. And as we pointed out, the more granular you make it, the more data you can share, the efficiencies will just improve off the back of this. And then, the whole technology is looking, this is like its total infancy. It's like the internet back in 1989. That's the way I look at it right now. What's this technology going to do by 2050? And it's just like one of these things. So it's at its beginning, and I've been involved in it for about 4 years now. So it's exciting to see more and more people get involved in it, and bigger companies investing in it, and all the major operators are now creating divisions for it as well. So this is how serious they're taking the technology and how they're going to apply it. And then obviously they'll be doing stuff they're not even making aware to people. So it's interesting from that. And then you go to any of the blockchain events. Having gone to like multiple oil and gas events, I was involved in oil and gas information stuff since like 2005, project information, stuff like that. And then but then again, everyone's sort of working in silos. But it seems to be when you're working with this technology through blockchain events, everyone's collaborating a lot more because they see the benefits of collaboration, which I think that's what's the key behind the whole technology itself.
I have to agree that data is very key in this, but seeing the applications, you are measuring nowadays much more, and you can analyze that much better and so on. But still, I see that process knowledge, modeling behind it, meaning that you understand what the process is all about, and then making deductions out of that to the real use cases. It's not going to be only machine to machine. So there is still the role for people and expertise, and you have to have that connected to the different applications. You can do it for machine learning, but I still see this kind of hybrid models much better, where you have the machine learning connected actually with the model-based analytics. So and these are tools what we just heard. So now we can do it. We can actually realize it, but we need to have also people involved with this whole thing. So Mateo, sorry, I was
no,
interrupting you.
I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because I completely agree with you. Actually, the experiences that we have had of trying to apply artificial intelligence at the very beginning, because it was what we needed to do, it was completely a disaster, to be honest. Right now, what is working for us is having the knowledge of the process, understanding what we want to do, understanding in what parts of the process we want to apply artificial intelligence, because it is going to add some value, because it is unpredictable, because there are a lot of variations, because it depends on a lot of external things, because we have historical records that have quality enough. And finally, you apply that, and you have a system that helps you to make decisions. That is what you normally want to have. And what I wanted also to say regarding the different things that we have been mentioning, because we have been discussing about some technologies, some IT technologies that are really promising, and that we feel really passionate when we are very techies on that. But we always need to see that we always have some emerging technologies that are very promising, that probably they are going to change everything, all the market rules in a few years. That can be 5 years, that can be 30 years. To be honest, I don't know. But also we need to manage some projects in the short term that we don't have those technologies. There are some technologies that are right now mature enough. So we need to do some projects trying to add value to the plants, to the assets, to the market, to the society, applying those technologies. And of course, we should be doing R&D and some pilot projects with those promising technologies that can bring us some values in the future, but we need always to balance those two things, and that is sometimes very complicated. To not be loose on the technology side, but also to have very clear what are the targets that we have.
I'm very glad you were saying that, because I think it's very important to know when the technologies are ready enough to be taken into use. And we have had some examples like about HoloLenses and other AR, VR applications. And everyone has been asking that when it will be really true, when everyone is using it. So there are many things what you have to have ready before you will able to utilize that in the wider scope, but there is a big potential there, and for those who understand how to use it and how to benefit from that, they will be the winners in that one.
And I think, TUULA, that it's two sides. It's the technology should be mature and the sector should be mature, because, for instance, blockchain in some sectors it is mature enough. In the financial sector it is changing a lot of things, and that is going to be a big game changer in the following couple of years, probably. But energy, as you said before, is more traditional in some things.
Yeah, they want to have proven technology, which is very good.
Agree.
Which is good.
Yeah. Yeah, but I 100% agree with that. It's just like it's at its absolute infancy with the energy industry right now. So everything's pilot projects, you know. So for people out there thinking they're doing that, you know, you've got the Blockchain Association out of Houston that's probably leading the way in the US with it. You've got every major operator involved in it in the US now. You know, it's ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, Shell, Saudi Aramco. So all these guys are now starting to collaborate. But they're even standing and saying this technology is just at its infancy. It's going to be, you know, 5-10 years before people start to see it across the industry. But what's interesting about it is that they're all getting involved in it. And then the people that are employing in it as well, they're, you know, a lot of them, you've still got the traditional oil and gas guys, but then you got all these sort of Silicon Valley super geeks as well, you know. So it's like these guys are merging, coming into it as well, which is interesting, you know. So it's a real mix of people when you start going to these events. So it's interesting for that. But no, I agree with you guys 100%. You know, it's just how does it get applied to the oil and gas sector? Because it's a traditional sector that's always been successful. It's just like it'll start to come in very small ways before it starts to get, you know, full implementation. Probably, you know, it could be 10 years before a lot of people out there start to see it as well.
I'm a bit curious, Alistair, on related to data security and information security, and if there's any value added by implementing blockchain in the energy sector in terms of information security, because that's one of the topics we've quite frequently come across when we deal with the energy production companies in various parts of the world. There's a lot of focus on the information security, keeping the information secure, encrypted within the country, and so on. What's your view on how can
so a lot of it's like, so people think about Bitcoin and running on blockchains and all these open source blockchains. Like all the major operators will all be encrypted, but on permission blockchain that maybe only 3 big operators are working on it, or an operator in a service company, or an operator in 2 service companies. So it's not going to be open source that like we'll all be able to go on and start seeing this information hashed on the blockchain somewhere. It'll just be all under permission blockchains. That's why they're all starting to use it more. Because now they've realized that, wait a minute, is this open source information, all this code that's out there, people can access it, you know, things like Ethereum that are running more and more sort of applications, that Cardano is starting to run a lot of applications on it as well. And, you know, we're speaking of the financial sector, but when the oil and energy companies come in, it'll be permission blockchains, it'll be very secure, and it'll be a very, very small amount of people getting access to this. You know, it'll probably have less people getting access to it than currently they do with databases speaking to each other through APIs. So the cybersecurity is like probably the number one thing for blockchain with energy companies right now. and sharing information. And that's the difference between a permission blockchain and a public blockchain, where public blockchain people can access it. Permission blockchain, we won't even know these blockchains are existing and operating. It'll just be the operators themselves, or the operators and service companies and the different manufacturing companies working together on this. So the cybersecurity is probably key with it. And I think that piece of trust in it is what they like about it as well, you know?
I have so understood actually that blockchain is actually one of the solutions to the data security. If we think about, for example, that what we have been having projects where you do, for example, 3D printing, and you are sending your own design to that printer. The blockchain is the only solution which is then possible, because you don't want to reveal those designs to anyone else. So I have understood that is actually the way. So machine to machine data, is that too much to?
It's controlled as well. It'll be so tightly controlled. People think it's going to create a new level of cybersecurity. They're going to trust, and this is how the operators will be able to start trusting, working with each other more. You know, because essentially they're the only ones using their own permission blockchains. And going forward, they'll end up running their own blockchains. You know what I mean? So it'll just be, they'll be their own blockchains, and they'll be the ones running it, and they'll be inviting people to access it. So this thing's not going to be open source. It'll all be permissioned. And that's why they'll become comfortable at using the technology, you know? I think that's what's confusing for a lot of people, because they see about the financial stuff and, you know, Bitcoin transactions and all this stuff hashed, and you can track it even though it's, you know, happening in milliseconds. When the operators are doing this, is all permission blockchains. Like, none of us are going to be able to access it unless you're invited to access it, basically. And then it'll all be encrypted, and it'll be cybersecurity. It'll be like the #1 protocol for the whole thing. I'm actually going to have to go. If my mother's basically waiting for me.
Yeah, I think we are actually coming slowly towards the end of the session here, and I would like to say thank you very much to all the panelists. It's been super interesting and great to meet you all. And are there any final comments or remarks? Please go ahead. Otherwise, I think we can slowly wrap up.
Yeah, I would just say, I'll just go first then. It's just, you know, digitization, automation, artificial intelligence, you know, to me, all these technologies are just starting to all merge together, you know? And it's just, the technology is advancing faster than we can use it, but it'll all still come down to human interaction, how we utilize this technology. You know, we spoke about it earlier as well, and that'll be the key in going forward. It's like, we're not suddenly going to be automated out of the industry. It's just going to be, how do we utilize this technology going forward? And I think that's the key, and I think that's what's going to be the opportunities for so many people out there as well. It's not going to be suddenly there'll be no jobs in the industry. It'll just be, there'll be a lot of different type jobs and how we work going forward, but there'll be so many problems that we're going to start to solve in terms of not only speaking with the blockchain, but I think for CO2 emissions, stuff like that as well. You know, the transition to renewable energy, it's just exciting times, and you know, it's just going to happen a lot faster than we realize once we start to apply the technology in a bigger scale.
Alistair was saying so many things what I wanted to say also, but I think that it's great that we are having this kind of seminars and conferences, although it's now a bit different with this virtual way of meeting, and this cooperation is very, very key in learning from each other how to apply and what are the potentials, and very much enjoyed this discussion. So hopefully there will be a lot of cooperation between, for example, TECNATOM and us, as we do have already.
Yeah.
So
thank you
for this.
Yeah, from my side, I want to say that we also see a lot of movement towards collaboration. We're working a lot actively on collaboration, on improving, helping, facilitating better collaboration between our customers. Often our customers are partners with other operating companies, and we're working with them how to exchange information and really take out all the synergies between their organizations. And there's a lot of interesting stuff happening there as well. So that's my final remark, I guess. So thank you, everyone. Mateo, any last remark?
Yeah, just very quickly, I just wanted to say what that I said before, that I think that technology is a tool. It is an amazing tool, but we need to understand that it is just a tool. So the key thing is to understand the process, to have a key process knowledge, to understand which are the pain points that we have, which are the challenges, and to try to apply this tool that we have, which are the technologies that are right now affordable, emerging, that we can use it. We can do a lot of very interesting things that we couldn't do and we wanted to do, as TUULA said. And that is the way to start piloting, to identify very good the use cases, to check if it is valuable, and then to scale up and to try to get the value from that as fast as we can, because probably a new technology is going to emerge and we are going to have other opportunities to do things and to improve. So thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you, Mateo, TUULA, Alistair, and over to you, Jay.